You're nothing to me, my daughter Lauren spat the words, and they pierced my heart with the cold precision of a surgeon's scalpel. I had spent 70 years building a life of love and devotion, and in a single cruel moment, my world crumbled. Her voice, once my favorite melody, now echoed with a venom I could not comprehend. I stood frozen in the opulent living room, the space that had once held my family's greatest joys, now feeling like a suffocating cage. The air grew thick with a bitterness I had never known. The truth was starting to settle in. It was not just a disagreement, it was a complete unraveling. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The evening had started so perfectly, we were celebrating my late husband Mark, 2 years since he passed. I had set out his favourite single malt scotch, polished the silver trophies he won at the local golf club, and arranged a bouquet of his preferred white roses on the mantel. The house felt alive with his memory. Lauren arrived with her husband Michael a few minutes late. Their new electric sedan hummed softly as it pulled into the circular driveway. Lauren stepped out, her designer dress shimmering under the porch light, a radiant smile on her face that seemed to brighten the whole evening. "You look so beautiful, Mum," she said. Her hug was warm and sincere. Michael, ever the charming son-in-law, held a bottle of vintage champagne. I should have noticed the way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes, a subtle glint of calculation that I dismissed as pure adoration for my daughter. After dinner, as we sat around the fireplace, the conversation turned serious. Lauren took my hand, her voice dropping to a gentle, earnest tone. "Mum, you know how much we want to give our baby the best possible start in life, a beautiful home and a secure future. Michael is an incredible provider, but we found a golden opportunity, a real estate investment fund managed by his friends that could double our money in a few years. It's an exclusive offer, and we need to act fast. Michael's parents are helping, and we were hoping you would too." It sounded like a dream come true, the perfect chance to use some of the money Mark left me to help my only child. I had always wanted to see Lauren settled and happy. I would have given her anything. When I asked about the details, Michael nodded confidently. "We've had our lawyer review everything, Mrs. Miller. It's a solid investment. You can even talk to him if you want. It's a no-brainer." The next day, as I prepared to sign the papers, a strange sense of unease settled in my gut. I decided to make a quick trip to the bank to check on the accounts. I had given Lauren a supplementary credit card years ago for emergencies and little luxuries. I wanted to see if she had used it lately. The teller, a kind young man named David, looked at me with a professional but sympathetic expression. "Mrs. Miller, are you sure about this?" he asked. "There are some very unusual transactions on this account." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. David showed me a detailed list of recent purchases. There were charges from high-end boutiques on Fifth Avenue, a series of expensive dinners, and a staggering bill from a luxury resort in Paris. The total sum was over $50,000. This was not the spending of someone in need of a start. This was a lavish lifestyle, financed entirely by my generosity. My hands started to shake, and I felt a wave of nausea. I immediately called Lauren. My voice was trembling slightly. "Lauren, I just saw the charges on the card I gave you. You were in Paris. I thought you and Michael were saving every penny." Her voice, so sweet and calm moments before, hardened instantly. "Oh, Mom." It was a business trip for Michael, a little surprise for him. "I was going to pay you back, I swear. Just an oversight. A complete lie, and I knew it." The words tasted like ash. I told her I wanted the card back. That's when the dam broke. "You never understand anything," she spat. "You're just in the way." The silence on the line after Lauren's outburst was deafening. It wasn't the sound of an apology or even regret. It was the chilling confirmation that my daughter saw me only as a utility, a resource to be exploited. I hung up the phone without another word, my heart heavy, but my mind suddenly clear. The blind devotion I had carried for 70 years was finally gone. In its place, a cold, hard resolve began to form. I grabbed my car keys, bypassed the usual rush-hour traffic on the Long Island Expressway, and headed straight for the Chase private client office in Manhattan. My steps were purposeful as I entered the gleaming marble lobby. I wasn't the timid old woman who came to check her account balances. I was Patricia Miller, a widow and a former professor, here to protect her legacy. I asked to see a senior manager immediately. When Mr. Harrison, a man in his 50s with an impeccably tailored suit, sat down, I didn't mince words. I need to freeze and revoke all supplementary access, credit cards, and checking accounts I have granted to my daughter Lauren and her husband, Michael, I stated, my voice steady. Effective immediately. Mr. Harrison's composure wavered slightly. Mrs. Miller, that is certainly an unusual request. We can process that, of course. But before we do, I need to verify all recent activity. He pulled up my accounts. My main savings and investment accounts were still intact, protected by my husband's meticulous structure. But then he pulled up the joint checking account I kept for general expenses and the funds I occasionally transferred to Lauren. There is a wire transfer here, Mrs. Miller. That requires verification, he said, his brow furrowing. A transfer of $500,000, initiated 3 weeks ago. It's marked as an investment capital transfer and was routed to an offshore trust account. My breath hitched. $500,000. The exact amount Lauren had pitched to me for the Golden Opportunity Real Estate Fund. I hadn't signed the paperwork yet. I had only verbally agreed. My heart pounded against my ribs as I looked at the digital trail. The paper trail confirmed my worst fear. They had moved the money without my final legal consent, likely using my verbal agreement as leverage or outright forging my instruction. That transfer was not authorized by me, I said, my voice rising slightly. I only agreed to sign the documents, but I never initiated the wire. Mr. Harrison immediately went into emergency mode, placing calls and logging the incident. But the damage was done. The money was gone, vanished into an international account that would take time and significant legal effort to track. This was not a plea for a down payment or a request for a loan. This was a calculated, outright theft. They hadn't just used me as an ATM. They had tried to empty the vault. When I finally left the bank, the afternoon sun felt harsh and unforgiving. I was down $500,000, but the financial loss was secondary to the emotional devastation. My own daughter had committed fraud against me. Her "you're nothing to me" wasn't just a fit of rage. It was the motto of their entire scheme. The clarity of the betrayal galvanized me. I drove straight to the law firm that had handled Mark's estate. I asked for Mr. Thomas, the senior partner, but he was unavailable. Instead, I was introduced to a younger attorney named Richard Vance. Richard was impeccably dressed, smooth and personable. He immediately recognized my name. "Mrs. Miller, it is an honor," he said, extending his hand. "I believe your daughter, Lauren, mentioned me. She actually spoke very highly of me, and I was recommended to her by Michael." The name-dropping hit me like a splash of cold water. Lauren mentioned me, recommended by Michael. The alarms in my head began to scream. Was this the same lawyer they had referenced when pitching their solid investment idea? Was this another trap? I sat down, forcing a calm expression. I decided to test the waters, to play the role of the confused, grieving widow they expected. I recounted a fabricated, less dramatic version of the events, leaving out the $500,000 fraud. I simply talked about the excessive spending and Lauren's mean words. I wanted to see his reaction, to gauge his allegiance. Richard nodded sympathetically. Mrs. Miller, this is a terrible situation. Family dynamics can be complicated. Given the stress you're under, and since Lauren is talking about moving you to a smaller property in the near future, perhaps we should look into setting up a power of attorney and some revised estate planning, just to simplify things for you. His language was too smooth, too persuasive, and centered entirely on reducing my control and simplifying my assets. The mention of moving me to a smaller property felt like a direct quote from Michael's playbook. I knew then. This sympathetic young man was not my ally. He was the final piece of their carefully laid trap. "Thank you, Richard," I said, rising slowly, gathering my purse and my composure. "That is all very insightful. I will consider your advice and call you next week." I left his office, not only having confirmed the $500,000 fraud, but also uncovering a deeper, more chilling reality. The betrayal extended beyond my daughter and son-in-law. They had a team, a network, and a plan to completely strip me of my autonomy and my home. My revenge would need to be much more strategic, smarter, and far more public than I had originally imagined. The moment I left Richard Vance's office, the chilling reality of the betrayal hit me fully. It wasn't just my daughter and her husband, it was a coordinated attack involving professionals. I drove home with a new resolve, shedding the last vestiges of the confused, grieving widow persona I had been playing. I was now a woman preparing for battle. I pulled into my driveway. The brick and ivy of my stately Long Island home, the one Mark and I had saved for and cherished, no longer felt like a safe haven. It felt like a ticking clock. I had to assume that Lauren, Michael, and their accomplice Richard were already moving forward with their plan, perhaps trying to expedite the process of getting me declared incompetent or coercing me into signing away my power of attorney. The first thing I did was call the one person I knew I could trust implicitly, Mr. Walter, the partner who had handled Mark's original estate planning 30 years ago. He was older, retired, and certainly off the radar of my daughter's circle. I gave him the briefest, most shocking summary of the situation. "Walter," I said, skipping all pleasantries, "my daughter has tried to steal $500,000 and is attempting to have me declared unfit. I need you to be my invisible shield." Walter's response was sharp and professional. "Patty, you need to pull every thread. Find the true core of this plan. I will start the legal countermeasures, but you need evidence that is unimpeachable." His words confirmed my next step. The money was only the beginning. Their main goal was the house and the business. I needed to understand Michael's financial entanglement with my late husband's company. The next morning, I drove to the industrial park where Mark's small manufacturing company, Miller Precision, was located. Mark had left the majority stake in a private trust for me, with Michael taking over as CEO 3 years ago. I hadn't interfered, trusting my son-in-law to run the legacy. I bypassed Michael's sleek, modern office and went straight to the accounts department. I knew the bookkeeper, an honest woman named Carol, who had worked for Mark since the company's inception. "Carol, I need you to print every expense report Michael has filed in the last 6 months, plus a full breakdown of the company's operating capital," I requested. I used my authority as the majority shareholder, and Carol, sensing the severity in my tone, silently complied. What Carol handed me was a horrifying catalogue of abuse. The company's once healthy operating capital was hemorrhaging money. The reports showed exorbitant expenditures labelled ambiguously: client entertainment, logistics overhead, and consulting fees. I focused on the consulting fees. Over the last 8 months, there were 11 payments of $20,000 each, totaling $220,000. They were all wired to an entity called Titan Management Solutions. Carol, I asked, pointing to the name, do you know what this company does? Carol shook her head, nervously running her hands over the keyboard. No, Mrs. Miller. Michael insisted on handling all contracts with Titan directly. He said it was highly specialized strategic management, but I never saw any reports or deliverables from them. The invoices just arrived every month, and he authorized the wire transfer immediately. I returned home, the stack of documents clutched tightly in my hand. I immediately Googled Titan Management Solutions. The search came up empty. No website, no corporate filings, just a PO, box address in a strip mall in Delaware, a known haven for shell corporations. I had a sudden, terrifying premonition. I cross-referenced the wire transfer details with the bank records I had secretly photographed from the teller's screen at Chase. The beneficiary account number for Titan Management Solutions was nearly identical to the private account number I had seen linked to Michael's personal finances, the one I had tried to freeze. I sat at my dining room table, the papers spread out like a morbid puzzle. I pulled up Michael's social media profile. There he was, posing smugly in front of a sports car. And then I saw it. A congratulatory post from a business associate referencing his successful side hustle in consulting. The chilling, undeniable truth slammed into me. Titan Management Solutions wasn't a consulting firm. It was Michael's personal, private holding company. The $220,000 wasn't a business expense. It was pure, untaxed profit that Michael was siphoning directly from my late husband's company. He was draining the lifeblood of the company, transferring its funds to himself under the guise of fake business expenses. This was no longer just about the house or the $500,000 fraud. This was a systematic, criminal embezzlement of Mark's legacy. My daughter, Lauren, was complicit in destroying the company her father built, brick by brick. The anger was white-hot, consuming all residual sadness. I realized their plan was threefold. First, drain the liquid assets through the $500,000 transfer and the $20,000 monthly consulting fee. Second, seize the fixed assets by forcing the sale of the house. Third, eliminate the threat by having me declared mentally unfit. I called Walter back. Walter, forget the civil suit for a moment. This is embezzlement. I have evidence Michael is running a shell company to funnel funds out of Miller Precision. I need a forensic accountant, and I need a legal freeze on all corporate assets immediately. This is Mark's legacy, and they will not destroy it. My voice was calm, but the ice in my veins was absolute. I was done being the victim. I was ready to become the predator. The realization of Michael's corporate embezzlement and Lauren's complicity didn't make me collapse. It made me calculate. My conversation with my retired lawyer, Walter, the previous night, had been clear. The primary goal now was to secure the legal high ground and gather definitive proof. I knew that a direct, angry confrontation would only serve their purpose. They wanted me to be emotional, irrational, and explosive. They needed me to confirm their carefully crafted narrative that poor old Patty is losing it. I had to become invisible, the quiet, predictable mother they could easily dismiss, while working relentlessly behind the scenes. My first act of defense was establishing my own safe zone. I hired a specialized forensic accountant, recommended by Walter, who worked outside the tri-state area and was known for absolute discretion. His name was Mr. Chen. I sent Carol, the loyal bookkeeper, copies of all the suspicious corporate documents, instructing her to send them to Mr. Chen under a fake business name. Carol, sensing the severity and injustice of the situation, became my first quiet ally inside the enemy's camp. My second line of defense was the medical record. I visited my longtime general practitioner, Dr. Evans, under the guise of an annual checkup. I spent the entire appointment being sharp, meticulous, and completely clear-headed. I narrated my schedule, recited complex historical facts, and even discussed stock market trends. The goal was to secure a pristine, recent medical evaluation confirming my mental fitness, anticipating their move to file papers challenging my competency. I walked out with a note stating that Patricia Miller was acutely attentive, well-oriented, and fully capable of managing all personal and financial affairs. Then, the psychological game began. I decided to play the role of the submissive, slightly worried mother. When Lauren called that afternoon, I answered in a soft, apologetic tone. "Lauren, darling, I'm so sorry about my reaction yesterday," I said, putting on the performance of a lifetime. "I've been under so much stress lately. I think seeing all those numbers at the bank just overwhelmed me. You know your father always handled the investments." Lauren immediately took the bait. Her voice softened, laced with a patronizing pity. "It's okay, Mum. We understand. You know, you really should let Michael take over more. It would take all that stress off your shoulders. We're family, Mum, and we want to take care of you." "Oh, you're so right," I cooed. "It's all too much for me now. I've decided I need a long break. I'm going to stay busy with my garden club for a few weeks, and then maybe go visit some old friends in Florida. It's probably best if I just step back from the finances for a bit and let the younger generation take the reins." This was the masterstroke. By suggesting I was stepping back, I was signaling to them that the path was clear to proceed with their plans. They would become complacent, less guarded, and more likely to make careless mistakes in their haste to seize the house and company. Over the next week, the pressure from Michael intensified, but now it was wrapped in velvet gloves. He would drop by unannounced, bringing me flowers and expensive imported coffee. "Mrs. Miller," he'd say, leaning against my kitchen counter, that false warmth dripping from his voice. Lauren and I found the most lovely retirement community near us. Gated, excellent amenities. We could sell this big old house for you, cash out, and you'd have zero maintenance worries. It's what Mark would have wanted. I would smile vaguely and nod. "That sounds lovely, Michael. I'm just so busy with my rose bushes right now. Can we talk about it next month? Perhaps you can bring the papers by then." I watched him. His eyes, however, were not on my face. They were constantly scanning the room, lingering on the ornate antique sideboard, the oil paintings, and most importantly, the heavy iron safe tucked discreetly behind a bookcase. He wasn't looking at a home. He was calculating square footage and market value. I used his complacency to my advantage. I spent hours meticulously documenting every item in the house, the market value of the antiques, the appraised value of the artwork, and every single piece of family jewelry. I created a secure, off-site digital ledger of every asset I possessed. They were after my money and my property, but they wouldn't get a single, undocumented item. The plot thickened when Mr. Chen's initial report came back. It wasn't just $220,000. Over 2 years, Michael had systematically funneled nearly $650,000 out of Mark's company through various shell companies, including Titan Management Solutions. The company was not just struggling, it was technically insolvent. Mark's legacy, the business that provided livelihoods for dozens of families, was being bled dry to fund Michael and Lauren's extravagant lifestyle. The emotional weight of this discovery was immense. It wasn't just my money, it was the destruction of my late husband's dream. This changed the nature of my revenge. It was no longer about personal retribution. It was about justice for the innocent people Michael was harming. I called Walter immediately. "It's worse than we thought, Walter," I said, my voice low and steady. "The company is being destroyed from the inside. We need to file the corporate injunction immediately, but I want to time it perfectly. I want the injunction to hit the same day Michael expects to close the sale of the house. We hit them where it hurts the most, all at once." Walter paused. "That's aggressive, Patty, but it's doable. We will need to move quickly and quietly. The clock is ticking, and we need to find the paperwork for the house sale." I knew where the papers would be. Lauren and Michael would keep them somewhere obvious, somewhere they thought I wouldn't look. And I knew exactly how I would find the papers. I just needed one more calculated visit from my unwitting allies to confirm the final piece of their treacherous plan. A few days later, the phone rang. It was Lauren. Her voice was cheerful, almost giddy. It was a stark contrast to her last vicious outburst. My performance had worked. They were feeling confident, even victorious. They had the upper hand, or so they thought. "Mum, can you do me a huge favor?" she asked. "Michael and I are going to the lawyer's office to finalize the paperwork for the real estate investment. We need a family photo for the official documents, and we want to take it in front of the fireplace at your house. It's so special to us. Can we stop by this afternoon?" My blood ran cold. The real estate investment was a cover for the sale of my house. The family photo was a pretext to get me to sign a document, likely a deed transfer. I knew what they were up to. They were going to try to trick me. "Of course, darling," I said, my voice sweet and cooperative. "Come by any time. I'll even bake your favorite cookies." After I hung up, my hands were shaking. I had to assume they would try to get me to sign something today. I needed a plan. Fast. My granddaughter, Lily, arrived from her high school a few hours later. She was the one person in my family I knew I could trust. Lily was a serious, thoughtful girl, and she had an almost intuitive sense of when something was wrong. "Grandma, are you okay?" she asked, putting her backpack down. "You look a little pale." I looked at her, and the words just came out. "Lily, I need your help. Your mother and father are trying to take my house and my money. I need to get some information from them when they arrive." Lily's eyes widened, but she didn't question me. She just nodded. "What do I need to do?" I explained the plan. The moment they arrived, Lily was to take a discreet video recording of the entire interaction. Her phone would be hidden, but its microphone would capture every word. It was a risky move, but I needed the evidence. I needed to prove they were trying to coerce me. An hour later, Lauren and Michael arrived. Lauren was carrying a folder. Michael was holding a tripod with a professional camera. They were playing their roles perfectly. "Mum, we're so glad you came around," Lauren said, embracing me tightly. "We're doing this for you, you know. It's time for you to relax and let us handle things." I smiled and led them inside. Lily was already there, studying on the couch with her phone tucked into the cushion, recording. Michael set up the camera. "Okay, Mrs. Miller," he said. "Just stand here by the fireplace. We'll take a few photos for the documents." Lauren handed me a document. "Mum, just sign here. It's just a formality for the investment fund." I took the document, my heart pounding. It was a power of attorney, giving Lauren and Michael full control of all my assets, including the house. I had seen enough legal documents in my life to recognize what it was. It wasn't a formality. It was a trap. "I need to read this first," I said, holding the paper up to the light. Lauren and Michael's smiles disappeared. "Mom, don't be dramatic. It's just a formality. We're in a hurry," Lauren said, her voice turning sharp. I shook my head. No, I am not signing anything without reading it first. Michael, his face turning red with anger, stepped closer. Linda, we have a buyer waiting for the house. We have a real estate agent lined up. We need to finalize the papers now before someone else swoops in. My heart pounded against my ribs. He was admitting it. They were going to sell my home. You're not selling my home, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I am not moving, and I am not signing this document. I've already spoken with my lawyer. You will get nothing from me. The room went silent. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Michael and Lauren looked at me as if I were a stranger. Lily's phone, hidden on the couch, continued to record. Michael's mask of a charming son-in-law fell completely away. You foolish old woman, he hissed. We've been planning this for months. Do you think we'd let you get in our way? We'll just declare you mentally unfit and take everything from you anyway. You won't see a dime. Lauren's eyes, filled with a cold rage, looked at me as if I were a piece of garbage. You're going to be sorry for this, Mom. You'll regret ever crossing us. I was calm. I had all the evidence I needed. The verbal threats, the legal documents, the physical presence. I felt a surge of triumph, a rush of power. I was not the victim anymore. I had the power to fight back, and I knew exactly how I would use it. My house felt different after they left. The silence was no longer heavy with grief. It was filled with a quiet sense of purpose. I was no longer a victim. I was a strategist. Lauren and Michael had shown their cards, and now it was my turn to play mine. I knew their public facade was a carefully constructed lie, and I needed to expose it. My first move was to find a witness to their double life. I contacted an old friend, a former detective who had retired from the NYPD. He was discreet and trustworthy. I didn't give him all the details. I simply asked him to recommend a private investigator known for their subtlety and effectiveness. He gave me a name and a number, a Mr. Jenkins. I met Mr. Jenkins in a small diner outside the city. He was a man of few words, with sharp, observant eyes. I laid out my request plainly. I need you to investigate the financial activities of my daughter, Lauren, and her husband, Michael. I need to know everything about their spending habits and their true financial situation, and I need it to be done with absolute discretion. He nodded, accepted the retainer I offered, and was gone. The waiting was the hardest part. The days stretched into a long, agonizing blur. Each time the phone rang, I jumped. I assumed it was them, calling to continue their manipulative game. But I ignored their calls and their messages. The game had changed. I was no longer a participant. I was an observer. After what felt like an eternity, a large manila envelope arrived in the mail. It was thick and heavy, filled with a sense of finality. My name was typed on the front in a cold, impersonal font. There was no return address. I knew it was from Mr. Jenkins. I sat down at my kitchen table and carefully cut open the envelope. Inside was a report, hundreds of pages long, filled with bank statements, credit card receipts, and photographs. The narrative of their lives, once so perfectly crafted for my benefit, was laid bare in a horrifying detail. The first section was a breakdown of their income. They claimed to be struggling, to be burdened by debt and the stress of starting a family. But the report showed that their combined income was well into the six figures. It was more than enough to cover a comfortable life. But their spending, it was something else entirely. It was an assault on good sense. I turned to the receipts. They were a detailed, grotesque log of their extravagance. There were charges from high-end jewelers in Manhattan for a diamond necklace for Lauren and a luxury watch for Michael. The purchases amounted to over $25,000. There were receipts from Michelin-starred restaurants, where a single dinner cost more than a week of my groceries. But the most shocking discoveries came from a recent trip. Michael and Lauren had told me they were going to stay with friends in the Hamptons for the weekend to save money. The report revealed a very different story. They had taken a chartered private jet to Beverly Hills. The receipts from that single trip were like a punch to the gut. They had spent over $50,000 in a single weekend. They stayed at a luxury hotel, and the report included a photo of them lounging by the pool. I saw receipts from exclusive boutiques, where a single pair of shoes cost more than what I had spent on a month of bills. There were charges for designer bags, watches, and custom-tailored suits. They were living the lives of billionaires, all while pleading poverty to me. But the most gut-wrenching part of the report was yet to come. It was a section dedicated to a trip they had taken a month before. They told me they were going to a weekend business seminar in the Midwest. The receipts showed that they had actually flown to Hawaii, not for a business seminar, but for a lavish vacation. The cost of the trip was a staggering $20,000. There were photos of them on a catamaran, laughing and clinking glasses of champagne. The sheer audacity of their lies left me speechless. They were not just stealing from me, they were laughing at me while they did it. Every lie, every tearful phone call about their struggles was a premeditated performance. The struggles were just a convenient excuse to open my wallet. My hands began to shake again, not with fear or sadness, but with a cold, righteous fury. My daughter was not in financial trouble. She was a master manipulator, and she was having a fantastic time at my expense. I closed the report and sat there for a long time, the weight of the paper in my lap. I knew now what I had to do. This was no longer a matter of personal loss. It was about exposing a calculated, deliberate fraud. I knew exactly where to hit them where it would hurt the most. The discovery that Michael was systematically draining my late husband's company, Miller Precision, was the key that unlocked the true depth of their malice. The forensic report from Mr. Chen was damning. Over $650,000 siphoned out through fake consulting fees. This was no longer just about defrauding an old woman out of her savings. This was a corporate crime that had destroyed livelihoods. I knew their ultimate goal was the house, and I knew they had to be in a rush. I needed to find the official paperwork they were using to push the sale through. Michael had mentioned a buyer was waiting. This meant they had signed a sales agreement, likely a short sale at the absurdly low price of $700,000, a figure I had heard Michael mention, a figure that would cheat me out of over half the home's real value. My first thought was to search their apartment, but that was impossible. I had to assume they were keeping the sensitive documents close, perhaps believing my house was already a compromised zone. I put on my most innocuous outfit, a simple cardigan and sensible shoes, and drove back to Miller Precision. I bypassed the front office and went straight down to the basement archives, a dusty, rarely used section of the building. I had an excuse ready. I was looking for Mark's old blueprints for a project he'd mentioned years ago. I found Carol, the bookkeeper, in the accounts receivable office. She looked pale and worried. "Mrs. Miller," she whispered. "Michael just laid off 4 people. He said it was restructuring. They're good people, loyal to Mr. Miller. This company is dying." "I know, Carol, but it's not dead yet," I assured her. "I need your help with one last thing. I need to know what real estate agent Michael is using to sell his apartment building in Delaware." Carol hesitated, then pulled up Michael's email on her screen, pretending to look for a routine invoice. She clicked a few times. "Here." The email is from a Century Bridge Realty. The agent's name is Derek Stone. Derek Stone. I memorized the name and the agency. I drove home, and the second I was in the door, I searched the agent. I found his professional website and saw my house, my cherished home, listed under his recent sales. The photo was carefully shot, obscuring the lush garden and highlighting only the structure. The price was listed as contract pending. This confirmed they were moving fast. The final piece of the puzzle, however, fell into my lap that evening through my granddaughter, Lily. Lily came over to study, but her demeanor was unusually guarded. She looked over her shoulder before she spoke. "Grandma, I overheard Mum and Dad arguing in the car today," she said, keeping her voice low. "It wasn't about the baby. It was about you." "What did they say, dear?" I asked, preparing myself for more cruelty. "Mum was yelling at Dad because he left a folder at his office, the one with the buyer's contract inside. They were panicking about the closing date. They're closing next Tuesday. That's 5 days from now." Next Tuesday. 5 days. That's why Michael was suddenly so aggressive, trying to push me to sign the power of attorney documents. They needed the final signature to clear the title and close the sale before I could launch a full legal attack. But Lily wasn't done. "And Grandma," Mum said something strange. She was looking at pictures of a small house, but not a beautiful retirement home. It was tiny, and she said, "Just get the furniture out of the way. It will only be temporary until the trust is set up." She said the rent was $2,000 a month, and it was in Queens, a really bad neighborhood, nothing like this. The chill I felt went beyond mere financial shock. The initial lie was that I would be moving into a luxurious, gated community. The truth, revealed by Lily's innocent eavesdropping, was that they planned to stash me in a cheap rented box in a distant borough, a temporary holding cell. This was the core of their malice. Not only were they stealing my home and my money, but they were planning to dump me somewhere isolated and dangerous, making it impossible for me to fight back or even see my granddaughter regularly. The low rent of $2,000 a month meant they would pocket the remaining profit from the sale, leaving me with nothing but a rental agreement in a rundown area. I thanked Lily, telling her how brave and smart she was. I promised her she was the only one I truly trusted. After Lily left, I immediately called Walter. "Walter, we have a closing date, next Tuesday, and we have their final plan. They intend to sell the house for $700,000, pocket the difference from the market value, and put me in a low-rent apartment in Queens, not a high-end retirement home. This is not just fraud. This is elder abuse and kidnapping preparation. We need to act on the corporate embezzlement now." Walter's voice was grim. "Patty, we're ready. We can file an emergency corporate injunction and a civil fraud suit simultaneously tomorrow morning. We will hit them on 2 fronts. The corporate asset freeze will be a public scandal, and the civil suit will put a lien on the house, stopping the sale dead in its tracks. But you need to prepare yourself. This is going to get very, very ugly." I looked out the window at the familiar lights of my beloved home. Ugly was an understatement. This was war. But for the first time, I felt completely in control. I had the evidence, the lawyer, the witness, and the perfect plan for public retribution. The clock was ticking down to Tuesday. 5 days stood between me and total financial ruin. 5 days for Michael and Lauren to force the sale of my house and vanish with the profits. I had to move with surgical precision. The next morning, I initiated the first phase of my counterattack. I called Walter and confirmed the dual filings. "Walter, I want the corporate injunction filed with the court immediately, and the civil fraud lawsuit placing a lien on the house to go through by midday." I want them to wake up to the sound of legal thunder. Walter assured me everything was in motion. This was crucial. The corporate injunction would freeze all assets of Miller Precision, stopping Michael from siphoning another dime and publicly exposing his embezzlement. The civil fraud suit would place a huge, unavoidable lien on my home, making it legally impossible for Michael and Lauren to close the sale on Tuesday. My next step was securing the final piece of physical evidence, the hidden documents. I knew they wouldn't keep the high-risk paperwork, like the actual sales contract showing the ludicrously low price, in their home. They would keep it where they felt most secure, somewhere they thought I would never dare to look. Their hiding place had to be somewhere at Miller Precision. I drove to the company office in the middle of the afternoon. The office was generally quiet then. I found Carol, the bookkeeper, sitting at her desk, looking stressed. "Carol, I need to look for Mark's original will. Michael is asking for it, and I can't find it at home," I lied smoothly. "I suspect Mark might have kept a copy in his old office desk. Can you open it for me?" Carol hesitated. "Mrs. Miller, Michael explicitly said no one is allowed in Mr. Miller's office, especially the desk. He changed the lock a few weeks ago." "I am the majority shareholder of this company, Carol," I reminded her gently but firmly, my eyes holding hers. "If Michael had nothing to hide, he wouldn't have locked his father's desk. Give me the master key." Reluctantly, Carol provided the key to Mark's old, magnificent mahogany desk. I walked into the former CEO's office. The room smelled faintly of Mark's old pipe tobacco and leather, but the desk was sterile. Michael had removed all personal items. I inserted the key and opened the center drawer. It was empty. I opened the side drawers. Still nothing. Then I noticed a small, almost imperceptible scratch mark beneath the bottom left drawer. A secret compartment. Mark had loved those old, theatrical touches. Using a paperclip I had brought, I pressed a hidden release switch. The bottom panel of the drawer clicked open. Inside, nestled amongst Mark's personal financial journals, was a bright red folder labeled simply "Closing Docs." I pulled it out, my fingers trembling. The folder contained the original sales contract for my house. I scanned the pages quickly. The price: $700,000, with a closing date set for Tuesday at 10 a.m. The buyer was listed as a limited liability company, Emerald Pines Holdings, LLC, another shell corporation. The biggest revelation was the commission split. Michael and the real estate agent Derek Stone had agreed to list the price at $1.5 million publicly, but the final signed contract, the one presented to the buyer, was for only $700,000. They were planning to pocket the difference, the remaining $800,000, as a consulting fee and a broker's bonus. This wasn't just low-balling the price. This was a massive, sophisticated wire fraud scheme. But there was another document in the folder. A thick, official-looking envelope labeled Estate Review. I opened it. It was a formal petition signed by Michael, Lauren, and their accomplice, Richard Vance, requesting the court to appoint them as temporary conservators of my financial and medical affairs, citing my recent erratic behavior, confusion, and inability to manage complex assets. Attached was a forged letter from a doctor claiming I exhibited signs of severe cognitive decline. My entire body went cold. They weren't just stealing my money. They were stealing my mind, my dignity, and my freedom. They planned to seize my life and lock me away. The depth of their callousness was stunning. They had anticipated my fight, and their plan B was to silence me completely. I quickly photographed every page of the petition and the fraudulent sales contract, putting the red folder back exactly where I found it. I locked the desk. As I walked out, I had to be the picture of disappointed failure. No luck, Carol. Just more of Mark's old blueprints. I'll check the archives tomorrow. When I got home, I immediately forwarded the photos of the conservatorship petition and the sales contract to Walter. Walter, they have filed a petition for conservatorship, and they forged a doctor's signature. They plan to declare me incompetent, I said, my voice dangerously even. We need to hit them with the legal documents tomorrow, but I also need to find that journalist I mentioned. I want the injunction and the conservatorship fraud to be a public spectacle. The socialized revenge begins now. Walter's response was firm. Patty, this is exactly what we need. The forged doctor's letter is a felony. This elevates the stakes from civil fraud to criminal conduct. We will file all motions tomorrow morning. Prepare yourself for the fallout. I spent the rest of the evening organizing the evidence, but my mind was already on the next phase. They valued their reputation more than anything. I would make sure they lost both their money and their public face in the most painful way possible. I knew exactly how to find the journalist. I would use the one thing Lauren cared about most, her social media image. The next morning, with the corporate injunction and the civil fraud lawsuit officially filed, I felt a strange mix of exhilaration and dread. I knew the moment the papers were served, the quiet, manipulative phase of their attack would end, and the explosive, aggressive phase would begin. I had to preempt their narrative. My primary focus shifted to the socialized revenge. Lauren and Michael didn't just crave wealth. They desperately craved status and public approval, curating a perfect life for their thousands of followers on Instagram and other social platforms. That curated perfection was their greatest vulnerability. I needed a journalist, not a local society reporter, but someone with a genuine interest in social injustice and financial crime. I knew Lauren followed the digital footprint of a popular investigative blogger and freelance journalist named Vera Stone. Vera specialized in exposing high society hypocrisy and elder financial abuse. Finding Vera Stone's professional contact wasn't hard. I tracked down her agent and sent a single compelling email with the subject line, Elder Fraud and Corporate Embezzlement by Long Island's Golden Couple, evidence attached. I didn't wait for a response. I immediately attached a meticulously organized document featuring the clearest, most undeniable evidence. The receipt for the $50,000 Paris trip, alongside the financial statements showing the $500,000 transfer, the full report on Michael's Titan Management Solutions shell company, and most damningly, the photos of the forged conservatorship petition, complete with the fake doctor's signature. I didn't ask her to write a story about me. I told her I was providing her with an explosive, fully documented case that would expose not just a family squabble, but a deep-seated culture of greed and financial elder abuse, featuring a respected business and a community darling, Lauren. Within 2 hours, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. "This is Vera Stone," a sharp, efficient voice said. "Mrs. Miller, I have your email. The documents are staggering. You have a story that could blow up the entire Long Island society circuit. I'm on my way." Vera arrived at my house within the hour. She was young, fiercely intelligent, and wore a relentless skepticism like armor. I invited her in, and we sat in the quiet living room, the scene of Lauren's vicious, "You're nothing to me" outburst. I explained everything: the years of silent sacrifice, the initial belief in their love, the gradual realization of the calculated conspiracy, the forged documents, and the terrifying plan to institutionalize me in a cheap rental property while pocketing the home's equity. I gave her the video footage Lily had secretly recorded, capturing Michael's threat to declare me mentally unfit. "Mrs. Miller," Vera said, reviewing the evidence with an almost surgical intensity, This is not just elder abuse. The fraud involving the company and the attempted conservatorship forgery makes this a potential criminal case. We need to publish this immediately, ideally before they can file their conservatorship claim in court, effectively neutralizing their move. We agreed on the timing. Vera would publish the investigative report online that evening. The headline would be designed for maximum shock and virality, ensuring that everyone in Lauren and Michael's carefully curated social orbit would see it. As we finalized the publication plan, the moment of reckoning arrived. The doorbell rang with a series of frantic, aggressive knocks. I looked through the peephole and saw Michael and Lauren, their faces contorted in a mixture of disbelief and fury. Standing behind them was a process server, holding a stack of legal papers. The corporate injunction and the civil suit had been served. "They are here," I whispered to Vera, who quickly retreated into the study, leaving the door slightly ajar. "Let the show begin." I opened the door, calm and composed. Michael's face was beet red, his veneer of professional charm completely gone. "What is the meaning of this, Patty?" Michael roared, shaking the legal documents in his hand. "An injunction? A fraud lawsuit? Are you insane? You've frozen the entire company, and we have a closing on Tuesday." "That closing won't happen, Michael," I replied, my voice a quiet contrast to his fury. "I've filed a lien on the house. You can't sell it." Lauren stepped forward, her eyes blazing with a predatory rage I had never seen directed at me. "You vicious old witch! You are completely losing your mind. We were trying to protect you, and you pulled this stunt." "Protect me?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Were you protecting me when you siphoned $650,000 from Mark's company through Titan Management Solutions? Or were you protecting me when you forged a doctor's letter to have me declared incompetent and locked away in a Queen's rental?" Their faces went slack with shock. The colour drained from Lauren's cheeks. They hadn't expected me to know the full extent of their criminal enterprise. They thought I was a confused, vulnerable target. "You don't know what you're talking about," Michael stammered, his bravado failing him. "I know everything," I corrected him. "I know about the $700,000 sales contract and the $800,000 broker's bonus you planned to steal. And I know about the apartment in Queens. You're not just financially abusive, Michael. You're a thief." Lauren's voice turned into a venomous hiss. "We are your family. When you die, we get everything anyway. Why are you fighting this? You're going to die alone and miserable." "I would rather die alone and miserable than die enabling a criminal," I stated. "And before you worry about what you'll get when I die, you should worry about what you'll lose tonight. I think you should check your social media." I closed the door gently, the sound of the deadbolt clicking into place, echoing the finality of my decision. The silence from the other side was broken by the sound of furious, panicked typing on a smartphone. I walked over to the study where Vera Stone stood, a predatory smile on her face. "The article just went live, Mrs. Miller," Vera announced. "It's already trending." My socialized revenge had begun. The world was about to see the true faces of Long Island's golden couple. The investigative article, titled "The Golden Scam: How a Long Island Socialite and Her CEO Husband Embezzled Millions from a Family Legacy and Attempted to Institutionalize Their Elderly Mother," exploded across the internet. Vera Stone was ruthless, presenting the evidence with journalistic precision. She published the documents of the $650,000 corporate embezzlement, the receipts for the $50,000 Paris trip, and the video footage of Michael threatening to declare me mentally unfit. The response was immediate and devastating. My phone, which I had kept silent for days, began to buzz with calls and text messages from friends, old colleagues, and people I hadn't spoken to in decades. The calls weren't judgmental. They were horrified and supportive. It was clear that Michael and Lauren's carefully constructed world was collapsing, not just legally, but socially. The true chaos began approximately 3 hours after the article went live, when Lauren and Michael finally returned home. I heard the crunch of their tires on the gravel driveway, followed by the deafening sound of the front door being violently thrown open. They had read the article. I was waiting for them in the living room, sitting in Mark's favourite armchair, sipping tea. I was wearing a simple tailored dress, the picture of quiet composure. They burst in, their faces unrecognizable, distorted by a frantic, blind rage. "You absolute sociopath!" Lauren screamed, her voice hoarse. She grabbed a vase from the console table, a wedding gift from 50 years ago, and hurled it against the fireplace. It shattered into a million pieces. "You ruined my life. How dare you call the press on your own daughter?" Michael was shaking, pacing like a caged predator. "The company is frozen, Patty. The bank just called the loan on the corporate account. I can't access any funds. Do you have any idea what you've done to my reputation? This is slander. We'll sue the publication and we'll sue you for everything you have left." I set my teacup down calmly. "You have nothing to sue for, Michael. The facts are published and the documents are real. I merely provided a detailed account of the corporate fraud and elder abuse you perpetrated. And as for my reputation, it seems to be in much better shape than yours right now." "You filed the conservatorship petition first," Lauren cried, pointing an accusing finger. "You're the one who started this, saying you were losing your mind. We were just trying to help." "Help?" I scoffed. "Help me into a $2,000 a month rental in Queens while you pocket the $800,000 bonus from the fraudulent sale of my home. Don't insult my intelligence, Lauren. I have copies of the forged medical document and the petition. That is a felony, not help." Michael's composure finally snapped. He lunged toward me. "Give me the passwords, Patty. Give me the access codes to the trust funds now, or I swear to God you will regret this for the rest of your miserable life." I didn't flinch. I looked him directly in the eye, my voice cutting through his aggression. "You have no power over me, Michael, and you have no right to touch my husband's legacy. Everything you took from Miller Precision will be recovered. You've lost your CEO position, your reputation, and your freedom to walk into this house. The police are already aware of the wire fraud and forgery documented in the article." The mention of the police stopped them cold. Lauren started sobbing uncontrollably, but these were not the manipulative tears of the past. These were tears of pure, desperate self-pity over the loss of her perfect life. "I hate you," she shrieked. "I wish you were never my mother. You were nothing to me then, and you're less than nothing now." "If I am nothing to you, then you will have nothing from me," I replied simply. "Everything you once stood to inherit has been restructured into a charitable foundation. You have effectively disinherited yourself through your criminal greed." This final blow, the removal of her future inheritance, hit her harder than anything else. Lauren collapsed onto the floor, clutching her head, the realization of her total failure overwhelming her. Michael, seeing the immediate legal and financial walls closing in, shifted immediately to self-preservation. He glared at Lauren with pure contempt. "You idiot! I told you to keep the old woman happy. I told you not to rush the conservatorship. You ruined everything." The scene was a visceral image of their partnership dissolving into mutual blame and hatred. They weren't a golden couple. They were two criminals turning on each other. "I think it's time for you to leave," I said, rising from the chair. "I've changed the locks, and I've registered this house as a protected asset with the local police. If either of you sets foot on this property again, you will be arrested for trespassing and harassment." Michael grabbed Lauren by the arm, dragging her toward the door. "This isn't over, Patty. We'll tie you up in court for 10 years. We'll make sure you pay for this public embarrassment." "I will see you in court, Michael," I answered, opening the door and letting the cool night air rush in. "I am looking forward to it, and I suspect the press will be too." I watched them stumble into their expensive electric car, the symbol of their vanity, and speed away into the night. The silence returned, heavy with the dust of the vase that had shattered, but also with the profound, intoxicating taste of liberation. The revenge was now complete, executed in the public arena they cherished most. But the true, deeper work of healing had just begun. After they left, a profound silence fell over the house. The shattered vase on the floor, a relic of my past life, was a stark reminder of the fragile illusion I had been living in. The revenge was complete. I had won. But the victory felt hollow. My daughter and son-in-law, the people I had loved and trusted, were gone. I was left alone in a beautiful house filled with the ghosts of a broken family. The next morning I woke up to a new reality. My house was no longer a battleground. It was a home again. The police had contacted me, confirming they had opened an official investigation into Michael's corporate embezzlement and the forged medical documents. They assured me that justice would be served. My lawyer, Walter, called to inform me that the civil suit was moving forward and that the conservatorship petition had been officially dismissed by the court. The legal system was working, and I had a sense of vindication. But the most difficult part was the social fallout. My phone, which had been silent for so long, was now a constant source of buzzing and ringing. It was a mix of supportive friends and horrified acquaintances. I had a lunch scheduled with my garden club, a group of women who had been a source of comfort for me for decades. I was worried they would judge me for publicly exposing my own daughter. I walked into the restaurant, my heart pounding in my chest. To my surprise, they didn't ask me about the scandal. They asked me how I was doing. They offered me hugs and words of support. One of them, a woman named Carol, who had lost her husband a year after me, took my hand. "We all saw the article, Patty. We're so sorry you had to go through this. We are so proud of you for standing up for yourself." Their support was a balm to my wounded soul. I realized I was not alone. I had a community of people who saw me as a person, not a resource. They were my true family. I received a call from Lily, my granddaughter, later that day. Her voice was small and sad. "Grandma, I'm so sorry. I can't believe they did that to you. I saw the article. I'm so ashamed." My heart went out to her. "Lily, you have nothing to be ashamed of," I said. "You were the one who helped me expose the truth. You are the bravest person I know. You were the only one who didn't let them blind you with their lies." Lily started to cry. "I want to come live with you, Grandma. I can't be in that house with them. They're horrible to each other. They're horrible to me." My heart swelled with love and sadness. I knew I couldn't be a part of their chaos anymore, but I couldn't abandon Lily. I told her to come over and we would talk. When Lily arrived, I made her a cup of hot chocolate, just like I used to when she was a little girl. We sat down in the living room, and I told her the whole story, from the beginning. The story of my love for her mother, the story of my trust in Michael, the story of the betrayal, the story of my fight for justice. "I don't hate your mother, Lily," I said. "I am just disappointed in her choices. I had to protect myself. I had to protect Mark's legacy. I had to protect my dignity." Lily looked at me with a wisdom that was far beyond her 16 years. "I understand, Grandma. I'm so proud of you. I just wish I had seen it sooner." I hugged her tightly. "We can't change the past, Lily. We can only change the future. You and I can build a new life together, one based on love and respect, not greed and manipulation. Lily's presence in my life was a profound source of healing. She was the one good thing that had come out of this whole ordeal. I had lost a daughter, but I had gained a new lease on life. My fight was no longer just about me. It was about teaching Lily that it was okay to stand up for yourself, to protect yourself, to demand respect. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and media attention. Michael and Lauren were forced to declare bankruptcy. The corporate embezzlement charges were so serious that they were facing prison time. The civil suit against them was going to ensure that they would never be able to financially harm anyone again. The judge presiding over the case had called their actions a textbook example of familial financial abuse and elder exploitation. I was no longer the quiet widow living in a big house. I was an advocate, a survivor, a voice for those who were too afraid to speak up. I had lost so much, but I had gained so much more. I had gained a sense of purpose, a renewed appreciation for the simple things in life, and a profound sense of self-worth. I was no longer a victim. I was a fighter. I had lost my family, but I had found myself. And for the first time in years, I was truly at peace. The courtroom drama, when it finally arrived, was swift and conclusive. Michael and Lauren, stripped of their power and their facade, stood accused not just of civil fraud, but of felony corporate embezzlement and attempting to forge legal documents. Walter, my lawyer, was masterful. He presented the evidence, the bank statements, the hidden surveillance footage from Lily's phone, and the testimony from the forensic accountant as an undeniable narrative of calculated greed. Michael pleaded guilty to the corporate charges in exchange for a lighter sentence, throwing Lauren completely under the bus. Lauren, seeing her entire foundation crumble, broke down on the stand. She was forced to admit to her knowledge of the financial transfers and the horrific plan to have me declared incompetent. The legal victory was absolute. The court ordered the liquidation of their remaining assets to cover the $650,000 they stole from Miller Precision, and both faced significant legal repercussions. The day the judge signed the final order, I was free. I had not only protected my assets and my home, but had resurrected Mark's company by installing Carol as the interim CEO and bringing in an external board. Justice was served, the revenge was complete. But the final act of my journey wasn't about the court or the money. It was about the heart. I sold the large Long Island house. It was too big, too full of painful memories, and too much of a symbol of my past life of sacrifice. I used the proceeds to purchase a bright, modern condominium near the ocean in a quiet New England town. The rest of the money I placed into a newly created foundation in Mark's name, dedicated to preventing elder financial abuse, a true legacy of turning poison into medicine. My granddaughter, Lily, came with me. She enrolled in a local high school and flourished, finally free from the toxic drama of her parents. Our relationship was the truest form of healing I experienced. We were two survivors, building a new life together, bound by honesty and mutual respect. Several months passed. The news of Michael's incarceration and Lauren's heavy community service sentence faded into the background. I often thought of Lauren, not with hatred, but with a deep, aching sadness. The rage had cooled, leaving only the scar of a lost connection. Then, one rainy afternoon, a thick, handwritten letter arrived. The handwriting was familiar, looping and elegant, yet somehow heavier than I remembered. It was from Lauren. I almost put it down, but Lily's gentle eyes, watching me from across the room, gave me the strength to open it. "Mum," the letter began. "I know this letter doesn't excuse anything. I was wrong. Completely and criminally wrong. I let greed rot every good thing inside me, and I let Michael turn me into a monster. I never truly hated you. I hated myself for being exactly what I accused you of being: selfish. She wrote about the shame, the community service, and the painful, hard work of therapy. She didn't ask for money or for forgiveness. She simply stated that she was working to rebuild her life, alone, starting from nothing. The one thing I learned, the letter concluded, is that you were the strongest person I have ever known. You fought for your dignity when I had lost all of mine. If you ever, in the very distant future, find a tiny corner of your heart for a coffee or a short email, I would accept it. If not, I understand. But I needed you to know I finally see the truth. Tears streamed down my face. They were not tears of pain, but of catharsis. I realized that my fight had not only saved me financially, but had also forced Lauren to face her own demons. My action, though painful, was the greatest act of motherly love I could have given her. I didn't call her immediately. I waited a week. Then I sat down and wrote a short, simple email. Lauren, I read your letter. I acknowledge the pain and effort it took to write it. I don't know what our relationship will be, but I am open to a path forward. Slowly, honestly, one day at a time. Patricia. I didn't sign it Mom. I used my own name, signaling that we were starting over as two adults with new boundaries and earned respect. I pressed send. Closing the laptop, I walked to the window. Lily smiled at me. The ocean looked vast and bright. I had not only achieved justice, but had also opened the door to hope. My new life was not a tragedy. It was a testament to resilience, proving that it is never too late to reclaim your power, and perhaps even find a way to heal what seems irrevocably broken. This story shows that strength isn't about how much you give, but how well you set your boundaries. Have you ever had to stand up to someone close to you to protect your peace or your finances? Share your biggest lessons learned in the comments below. We'd love to hear how you protected yourself.